Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping straight into quite a meeting, the one between the U.S. president and the Canadian Prime Minister.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. So our mission here is to really dig into the transcript we've got. It's from a Live Now from Fox YouTube video, and pull out what actually matters, beyond the handshakes.
Right, get past the diplomatic niceties.
We'll cover the opening. Congrats, some. Well, some pretty direct talk on trade, and even this slightly wild hypothetical about the two countries.
It's fascinating, really. The transcript gives you this glimpse, sort of behind the curtain. You can almost feel the dynamics, the tensions maybe between them.
Okay, let's get right to it then. It kicked off with the U.S. president congratulating the Canadian PM on winning his election. And he even joked pretty boldly that he'd had something to do with it.
Right. That definitely sets a tone, doesn't it? Sort of confident, maybe implying influence, and mentioning his own comeback, too.
Yeah.
It creates a specific atmosphere right away.
Yeah, and then he talked about the Oval Office, how proud he was of the, quote, new and improved version, mentioned the 24-karat gold.
Right. Setting the scene.
And looking at pictures of past presidents, felt like he was, I don't know, positioning himself.
Exactly. Establishing his presence, maybe hinting at his own place in history,
Then he circled back to congratulating the PM again. Great race, great debate, finding a lot of things in common.
Trying to build that connection.
Seems like it. Laying some groundwork, perhaps, before getting into the tougher stuff.
And yeah, the tougher stuff wasn't far off. Ukraine came up pretty quickly.
Both said they wanted the war over soon.
Standard point for allies, right? Shared concern.
Totally. They agree on the goal and the war fast, but the transcript, well, it doesn't give us much on how. No specifics on strategy or if they see it differently.
So agreement on the surface, but maybe complexity is underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That shows that, just wanting the same thing doesn't mean you have the same plan. Lots of uncertainty still.
Then this kind of breaking news element came in the Houthis. Oh yeah, the announcement.
The president brought it up, said they reportedly announced they don't want to fight anymore.
And that the U.S. would honor that. Stop the bombings.
And the Canadian PM jumped right in.
He did. Confirmed it was a freedom of navigation issue.
We're framing it carefully.
Against a band of individuals with advanced weaponry, he said.
It really underscores that shared worry about security in that region, doesn't it?
Definitely seemed like a unified stance on that specific threat.
Precisely. A common understanding there. And then the president mentioned his upcoming Middle East trip.
Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar.
Right. And teased this very, very big announcement coming before that. Maybe Thursday, Friday, or Monday.
Described as one of the biggest in years. Let you hang in a bit.
For sure. The Canadian PM even said he was on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, he seemed keen to hear it. His response to the president's opening was, well, very complimentary.
Called him a transformational president.
Pointed out his focus economy, the worker, borders, fentanyl, world security. Very diplomatic, yeah. He acknowledged the president's list, but then smoothly pivoted. He sort of aligned it with Canada's focuses to economy, borders, fentanyl, but also defense, Arctic security.
Smart move.
And he emphasized that history, U.S. and Canada being stronger together, setting up for cooperation.
Even if disagreements were coming down the track.
Exactly, which they were.
Because then came NAFTA and the USMCA.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
The president did not hold back, called NAFTA the worst trade deal in the history of our country, probably in the history of the world.
I mean, that's been his consistent line on NAFTA, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And he called USMCA transitional.
Right, even hinted it might need renegotiating again, though maybe not essential now.
So the biggest point of USMCA was just getting rid of NAFTA.
It really shows that fundamental difference in how they view trade, doesn't it? One side focused on deficits, getting rid of old deals.
And the other seeing it as more integrated, maybe.
Potentially, yeah. Or at least wanting to preserve the existing structures more.
Interestingly, though, amidst the trade talk, he did offer some personal praise for the Canadian PM.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shift.
Said he respected his rise, watched his campaign, mentioned a very helpful debate, even joked about almost raising his hand during it.
It was, a slightly unusual personal touch there.
Yeah.
Maybe trying to soften the trade criticism. Or just showing interest in politics generally.
Could be. But then came the real curveball.
The union idea.
Yeah, the hypothetical union of the U.S. and Canada. He actually put it out there.
He did. Said he believed it would mean a massive tax cut for Canadians.
And free military. And tremendous medical care.
Which, I mean, that's a huge simplification, right? Overlooking distinct identities, political system.
Definitely. And he brought in his real estate background,
Ah, yes, the developer perspective.
seeing the combined land as how it was meant to be.
Yeah, it's quite a statement for a meeting like this.
Yeah.
The free military part alone raises massive questions about sovereignty for Canada.
He did add a caveat, said it wasn't, on the table unless Canada brought it up.
Right, a slight backtrack maybe.
But then he immediately reiterated the benefits: lower taxes, free military, arguing the U.S. basically provides that anyway.
Suggests he genuinely sees it as advantageous, at least from his viewpoint.
Mm.
Maybe overlooking the complexities.
Called it a wonderful marriage.
An analogy that probably doesn't sit well with everyone thinking about national independence.
Well, it certainly didn't seem to sit well with the Canadian Prime Minister. His response was immediate.
Very firm.
Canada is not for sale. Clear as day.
And he used the Buckingham Palace analogy.
Mhm.
Some things just aren't commodities.
Right. A strong defense of sovereignty.
And then he pivoted again, quite skillfully.
Back to partnership.
Exactly. Talked about building together, past cooperation, committing to more security investment from Canada.
And he gave the U.S. president some credit, too, for revitalizing NATO and international security.
It was a way to reject the Union idea firmly, but still affirm the alliance, find that common ground on defense.
And the U.S. president did confirm Canada was stepping up militarily, but his response to the not for sale line, that was telling.
The never say never.
Yeah. Suggests it wasn't just a throwaway line for him, maybe an idea that lingers.
It definitely leaves a question mark there, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Highlights that fundamental difference in how they see the relationship's potential future.
Okay, so after that, slightly tense moment, they shifted to cars and energy.
Right, back to more concrete economic stuff. Shared interest in protecting the auto industry. That makes sense. It's so integrated.
And then the U.S. president really hyped up U.S. energy resources.
Oh, yeah. Tremendous abundance, especially Alaska. Potentially bigger than Saudi Arabia, he claimed.
Said both countries were very lucky on energy.
Unlike China and others. Another point of contrast he drew.
It was just after the not for sale bit that the Canadian PM made that little joke.
About the discussion being a little more difficult to start on now.
Yeah, kind of acknowledging the awkwardness, but the president just brushed it off. No, not at all.
Shows maybe differing levels of comfort after that exchange.
Then a big shift to China. Trade with China.
Right. The president said China wants to meet, but claimed there's no business happening right now, ships turning around.
He brought up that figure, losing $1 trillion in trade to China under the previous president.
And argued that not trading now is saving that trillion.
Which, trade deficits are complex. Economists see them different ways. It's about imports versus exports.
Exactly. It's his particular framing, focusing heavily on the deficit number itself as a loss or saving.
He went on, claims China's economy is suffering greatly because they aren't trading with the U.S.
And directly linked that to his tariffs. So they're driving companies like Honda to the U.S.
It talked about trillions in investment coming in. Now, tariffs can aim to boost domestic industry.
Sure, that's often the goal. Protect local jobs, encourage investment.
But there are always debates about the other side effects, right? Consumer prices, effects on global trade partners.
Absolutely. It's rarely simple. His claim links tariffs directly to investment, which is central to his narrative, but many factors influence those corporate decisions.
He also looped in criticism of the last administration on immigration.
Linking trade and security.
And praised specific companies investing: Apple, NVIDIA, Jensen. Said tariffs were the driver.
Reinforcing his core message. His policies bring jobs and money back to the U.S.
And his stance on trade deals overall was, well, blunt.
Very. Basically, the U.S. doesn't need deals. Other countries need the U.S. market.
Called the U.S. a super luxury store.
Yeah, that analogy, countries will have to pay to shop there.
Mentioned India dropping tariffs as an example. Said the U.S. has been ripped off for 50 years and it stops now.
It's a very unilateral view of trade, emphasizing U.S. market power. Memorable phrasing, definitely, though maybe not how other countries would see it.
He did quickly circle back to the Houthi thing, just to clarify.
Right, said it wasn't a deal.
Just an announcement from them to stop attacks and the U.S. would stop bombing in response. Said he was confident in the source.
Important distinction, responding to an action, not negotiating directly.
Then, back to USMCA. He called it a good deal for everybody, but then took a bit of a swipe at a previous Canadian official involved in the talks.
So mixed signals there. Good deal, but maybe not perfect. and some lingering issues with the process,
Seems like it. And the Canadian PM then chimed in.
saying USMCA is a basis for a broader negotiation.
Yeah, and that some things will need to change. He mentioned tariffs sort of taking advantage of parts of the existing deal.
Okay, so acknowledging it's not static, needs updating, or at least discussion, especially with current U.S. policies creating friction. That seems pragmatic.
Then there was the suggestion, maybe from the U.S. side, that Canada had decided to not shop in the American store as much, partnering elsewhere.
Diversifying trade.
The president seemed to downplay how much business the U.S. does with Canada compared to the other way around.
Which might underestimate the scale of that two-way trade. It's huge.
And he boasted about U.S. products being better, military gear included, that Canada buys.
Right, emphasizing U.S. strength and maybe minimizing the interdependence.
Okay, then a question came up about timing. When would those trillions in investment actually show up in the economic data?
Mm-hmm.
The president claimed it's already starting. AI plans, financing.
But then he pivoted to criticize the CHIPS Act.
Yeah, said it gave money to rich companies without enough strings attached and criticized woke DEI requirements.
And then brought up other projects he saw as wasteful: Obama's library, California's high-speed rail under Newsom.
Said the federal government wouldn't pay for the California Rail project.
So linking his economic vision to broader political critiques of domestic spending and priorities shows those ideological divides.
Right. Circling back towards the end, they talked about subtle changes being worked on regarding trade.
Still a bit vague whether that meant tackling USMCA directly or not.
Seemed the focus was more on the current situation with tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, baseline maybe 10%.
Mm-hmm. And the president mentioned some arrangement under USMCA that benefits Canada on car parts.
The Canadian PM then really emphasized Canada's position.
Said their view on trade with the U.S. is not going to change on the 51st day,
Meaning it's fundamental long term. And stressed Canada is the U.S.'s biggest customer.
a crucial point, easy to forget in deficit discussions.
Highlighted the integrated auto sector, how much U.S. content is in Canadian-made cars. Said the discussion is bigger than one issue, needs time.
So trying to frame it as a complex, long-term partnership, not just transactional.
But the U.S. president came back with his core desire. U.S. makes its own cars, steel, aluminum, reduce the deficit with Canada.
And stop what he sees as subsidizing Canada.
Yeah, he brought up that alleged past conversation with Governor Trudeau.
Right, where the PM supposedly said a 25% car tariff would be the end of Canada.
And questioned why the U.S. should subsidize Canada. Maybe $200 billion a year he threw out there.
That really lays bare the different economic philosophies, doesn't it? Self-sufficiency versus interconnectedness. And highlights the high stakes around tariffs.
And the president himself noted it got very, very heated right at the end there, talking tariffs.
You can imagine.
So, okay, wrapping this up. Key takeaways for you. It was a real mix, wasn't it? Pleasantries, security talk, but then some really intense trade debate.
Absolutely. They both stress the partnership is important, but you can't miss the big differences, especially on trade. The president's various sort of America first, deficit-focused view.
Versus the Canadian PM defending their interests, emphasizing how linked the economies are.
Totally. And that whole not for sale moment.
Met with never say never.
Right. It just captures that underlying dynamic, maybe some potential friction down the road.
So for you, the learner, diving into this transcript gives you this really valuable look at how high-level diplomacy actually works, or sometimes doesn't smoothly work.
Yeah, you see the personalities, the national priorities, the long-standing economic arguments all playing out.
Yeah.
Strong language, the different viewpoints. It tells you a lot about the challenges and opportunities for both countries.
So here's something to think about. With these really strong statements, these clashing economic ideas, what does the future look like for the U.S.-Canada relationship?
Mm-hmm.
What factors, economic shifts, maybe political changes on either side, even just a change in tone, what's going to shape where things go from here?
A really important question to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.